But first, tomorrow in Canberra, the Federal Liberal Party will meet to consider its attitude to Labor's constitutionally entrenched Indigenous voice to the Parliament and now, of course, to the executive government. It's hard to avoid the suspicion that the timing of tomorrow's party room has much to do with moving on from the weekend's shock loss in Aston. But if the party does indeed take a clear stance against the voice, which is wrong in principle and would be disastrous in practice, tomorrow's meeting might be the start of a Liberal revival and the making of Peter Dutton as a strong and effective leader. When the voice proposal was first raised at Uluru in 2017, there were just 5 Indigenous MPs in the Parliament. Now there are 11 individual Indigenous voices in our nation's Parliament. To the extent that Indigenous people need a voice, they've already got it via the voices in the Parliament, not to it, which is ultimately where all Australians have their voice. The Liberals' problem is that yesterday's speech by Indigenous Affairs Shadow Minister Julian Leeser seems to lock the party into supporting a separate Indigenous voice, only a different voice to what Labor's proposing. Here he is yesterday.
I support the idea of a voice because as a Liberal I believe in the dignity of the individual. I believe better policy is made when the people directly affected by the policy are consulted on that policy.
All right, let's unpack the non-secators there. Of course, Liberals believe in the dignity of the individual. Liberals have always argued for the individual against the tyranny of the state, just as Labor favours big government and collectivism. Of course, Liberals, indeed all sensible people, think it's better to consult someone before making policy in their name. Now, that's in part what underpins democracy, so nothing seismic there, Mr Leeser. But how does the dignity of the individual require the creation of a race-based voice to give some individuals, as a collective group, a greater say on how they're governed over everyone else? Now, I would have thought that the dignity of each individual completely rules out the creation of group rights that end up making some individuals, of course, more equal than others. And that's been my issue all the way along with how the Liberals have handled this issue of the voice. Instead of saying at the outset that giving some people special rights based on their ancestry is wrong in principle, the Liberals have quibbled about the detail. That's why I was so disappointed with Leeser's speech to the Press Club yesterday, because it didn't tackle the voice on the grounds of principle. It instead suggested that the government should drop or adjust a clause in its amendment, not because it was wrong in principle, but because it would be difficult in practice. And then he basically pushed this line that he was okay with a voice, just not Labor's voice, that somehow a different voice would fly.
As a matter of principle, I believe the voice at a local, regional and national level should be engaging with decision makers. It should be contributing to policy development, warning of problems emerging and engaging in thoughtful debate. In that sense, it should be engaging with executive government.
But what he went on to say are that the implications of putting that clause into the Constitution, what are those implications? Who can the voice talk to, he asked. What can it talk about? And what does it mean to make representations? Now, these are good questions. They're good questions. And it's not enough, Leeser says, to say that these questions will be addressed in legislation afterwards, because, he says, you can't out-legislate the Constitution. Except that to Leeser, this is just detail that he thinks can be fixed, rather than an inherent problem that should invalidate the whole voice exercise. He raises these issues, he says, because this clause will be the rallying point for the No campaign.
I raise these issues not only at the technical level, but as a political one as well, because this clause will be the rallying point for the No campaign. For those that want the referendum to succeed, it puts the broader constitutional question at risk.
And look, that's where he gets it so wrong. In wanting this referendum to succeed and in asking, indeed begging the government to amend its proposal to something he thinks is less dangerous, Leeser's making this fundamental mistake. He's assuming that constitutional recognition of Aboriginal people means some kind of voice. Well, it doesn't, and it shouldn't. There are lots of ways to recognise Aboriginal people in the Constitution without creating a kind of parallel co-government. One would be, as Tony Abbott always wanted, to insert into the preamble, after the sentence about us all being one indissoluble federal commonwealth, something like this: a commonwealth with an Indigenous heritage, a British foundation and an immigrant character, because that is, as Abbott used to say, unarguably true and pays equal regard to the people who have built this nation into what it is. Another might be to include the same words in the Constitution that the Federal Parliament passed without dissent in 2013 in the Indigenous Recognition Act. Again, if we've got that act already, why do we need a voice? Why do we need a voice? We do not need separate rights for Aboriginal people, creating two classes of citizens and divide us by race. The bottom line is that giving any one group of people, however honoured and respected that group might be, its own special and particular voice is wrong. It's wrong whether it's to the Parliament, the Executive, or just the Parliament. It's wrong whether it's in the Constitution or just even legislated. It's wrong whether it's a national voice, a local voice, a regional voice, or any combination of the above, because it offends the principle that all Australians, whether your ancestors have been here some 60,000 years or whether they've just got off the plane, that we're equal, all of us, before the law. Perhaps the worst outcome from tomorrow would be a decision to give the Liberals a free vote or a conscience vote on this, because it would show that the party can't have a clear and united position on something as important as whether each individual counts the same. Almost as bad would be to say we back some sort of voice, but not this one, because that concedes the principle while quibbling over constitutional detail. That's what the Libs have previously done on net zero and over the issue of a Federal Integrity Commission. It confuses the message and ends up leading to demoralisation and defeat. There's really only one position the Libs should have: that any voice entrenches the very separatism that is at the heart of current Indigenous disadvantage, that any race-based voice offends the principle of equality before the law, that there are better ways to recognise Aboriginal people in the Constitution, that this particular voice must be opposed. And not half opposed, not weakly opposed, but opposed with every breath in the Liberal Party's body. Now, I'm a fan of Peter Dutton, and I think he's the best person in the Parliament to lead the Liberal Party. I think that the next election is winnable, despite the current discouraging polls. But at some point, and on some issues, the Liberals have to take a stand and fight. If not now, when? And if not on this, what?